Welcome back to the show, everybody. Check out these numbers while we run the headlines this morning. We're going to talk about it. Jamie Dimon's got something to say. You're going to want to know it. Flare Networks in the news. We're going to talk about UK Bill. We're going to talk about BAKKT. Do you remember them? Owned by the parent company of the New York Stock Exchange. You're going to want to know that. Velocity of money, ladies and gentlemen. Can crypto help? We're going to find out from the Federal Reserve. And Polysign, could they be tied to the Federal Reserve? Could they be tied to the DTCC? Well, we're going to look at some evidence that suggests maybe so. And Brian Brooks says the answer to the question of whether XRP is a security, it's all about the way it was distributed, ladies and gentlemen. We got that and so much more. Somebody roll that beautiful intro.
Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. You can follow me on TikTok. You can follow me on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook for exclusive content. Right now, we got $1.053 trillion market cap. Ladies and gentlemen, we're bleeding off from the weekend. If you look, Bitcoin right now, 21,200 plus. We're off by 11.57% on the 7-day. If we look at Ethereum, much the same picture here. It's 1,500 plus and 16+% off. We come down to XRP. We see we're off by more than 8% on the 7-day at 33 cents. We'll take a look at the range of price before we get out of here today. Let's start right here, ladies and gentlemen. Another computer. This is the problem with being a YouTuber. You have so many tabs open at once. But look, I did it again. And I love this. And I'm telling you, until you do it, you just don't know and the feeling and you get until you actually have it set up. And it's Glint Pay. It is the gold alternative to the banking system, and I just love being my own bank with Glint Pay. I love being a customer almost more than I love working with these people. I'm telling you right now, click the link underneath the video. Until you experience it for yourself, you're just not going to know how good it feels to go out, take the family out for a dinner or whatever, and you can see we got a little heavy on dinner, but it was great, and I paid for it with gold. And by the way, hashtag GoldFi, Gold Finance, it is here. It is Glint Pay. And watch out for the bridge that they're going to be bringing to crypto very soon. Don't mess around and wait. It'll be too late. JP Morgan's Jamie Dimon's in the news. Dun, 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 dun. You know, he says here something worse than a recession could be coming. And look, I have said this myself. I do believe there is going to be a pay-to-piper moment for all of this money printing that's going on. And it may, for a time, get uglier than it did back in 08, 09. Now, I'm no economist. I'm a backyard economist, I guess is what they call it. But I mean, I don't think it takes someone to go to school to specialize in it to understand the moment the world is really in at this point. And I do believe that that will bring us to a crossroads where we will see crypto being used and stable coins to their advantage in the financial system to jumpstart this economy and to get us in the fourth industrial revolution, which is the Internet of Value. Now, until that moment really happens, I can tell you I am going to be watching very closely in this space what the SEC's doing because there's so much uncertainty, and we know that the Dragon Chain case is now being pulled up and sued by the SEC. The SEC is constantly trying to set precedent, and now I believe they feel they're probably not going to get everything they wanted in the Ripple case. So now they're going after these smaller projects to try to set precedent so they can achieve the same thing from attacking smaller projects that don't have the deep wells of liquidity and money, to our capital to really support their own defense. And here you see Dragon Chain also capped the number of Dragons tokens that could ever be created. Very similar situation to XRP in that regard, right? And that's why I'm putting my stuff on Ledger. Get off the exchanges. And by the way, it is an exchange. You get your stuff on cold storage and you can buy, sell, and trade right there directly to your cold storage wallet. 4 million customers can't be wrong, ladies and gentlemen. Try it out for yourself. There's always a deal. Make sure you click the link underneath the video. They have incredible deals to go along with their incredible service. Look right here. Flare Networks is a juggernaut. Now listen, we've seen a lot of false starts here. But hopefully that is because it is to get it right in the end. And if that's the case, who cares as long as they get it right? But listen to what David Schwartz has to say here about this.
Yeah, so I'm at the Flare team, formerly under the Ripple Spring effort, which was like a venture capital kind of arm at the time. Mm-hmm. We invested in them a few years ago. I'm very impressed with what they're doing. Flare has built a network using different pieces that they took from different blockchains, Ethereum smart contracts, Avalanche consensus, and XRP settlement. And what they're bringing to the XRP world is essentially a DeFi solution. So they have a fast and reliable settlement mechanism, XRP, and they have ways to essentially bring Ethereum-style smart contracts to the XRP world. They've gotten a lot of exchanges to support their airdrop, which I think is really impressive. That's a very difficult thing to do, and that's going to make it easier for people to just for their token to be sort of distributed widely, which I think helps with keeping the system decentralized and helps with, keeping the system reliable. It is fantastic to see companies building systems that add utility to XRP. And I think that the ability to use XRP directly in smart contracts is going to be tremendously useful.
And there you have that. And I do too. Look, when it comes to all of this, it will be exciting because we're talking about more use case for XRP. And that is really, really on the edge of being very, very explosive for the entire use case of XRP. Now, take a look at this because I don't think anybody can say it any better or faster than David Schwartz can about Ethereum. Just listen.
Ethereum is a more general purpose blockchain than the XRP ledger is. You can do anything on Ethereum. The question is, can you do anything well? The problem is...
And there you have it. We all know what the problem is, right? It is very limited to its network itself. But that's why you have things like projects like Flare and other projects that are building bridges to Ethereum so the people on Ethereum can get outside of that network because Ethereum doesn't have the interoperability outside of itself, right? Now, this is a very quick reminder here about the Digital Pound Foundation. Central Bank of Colombia is studying creation of digital currency. For that news, obviously, I wanted to show you this, but remember this as we go through the next several pieces of information. Ripple is on the Digital Pound Foundation. Ripple is on the Digital Euro Association as well. Let's keep that in mind as we move through these next several pieces. New UK bill bring digital assets like stable coins into the scope of local payments regulation, meaning there's already regulation for all of that if they just simply bring the stable coin into that scope. So watch out for that. That could be very quick and it could be very explosive for the space to have that kind of clarity on stable coins as well as domestically at home. Here's another reminder of a part of the space it's not really truly defined or developed yet. BAKKT's Gavin Michael, while speaking during the interview with Yahoo Finance on August 19th, suggested that crypto market is here to stay. Well, not exactly breaking news, but this is what I want to give to you out of this, right? Remember that ICE was founded and the parent company is ICE, right? Intercontinental Exchange, which also owns the New York Stock Exchange. So as we're thinking of this, remember in this regard, not only do we need stablecoin legislation, but the regulators and governments probably would like to see a couple platforms like NASDAQ and the NYSE, but for crypto. The exchanges themselves, I believe they see more as a Charles Schwab or a Fidelity and platforms like that. I believe that's how they view those platforms, right? And they want to see some neutral, right, platform like a NYSE that does all the pricing and plug in and all the, so there's no arbitrage, real price discovery, all of these things. What he said was crypto isn't going away, but the best thing is here. There's still strong interest and momentum with our partners, many of whom are multinational companies. So they've been watching this space for a long time. They understand the peaks and troughs, and we're seeing, we also see consumer interest in crypto remaining solid. We expect to activate our crypto services in the second half of the year, and we will see significant increase ramp up through 2023, he said. So watch out, ladies and gentlemen. Something needs to become, if we're going to see the market, crypto market, really superimpose the traditional market to an extent for regulation and framework, we still don't have that NYSE of the crypto space or NASDAQ of the tech company space like for crypto. So watch out. BAKKT could become that possibly, right? I mean, they've already got the history with the parent company. So we'll see. This right here, very quickly, velocity of money. I have covered it extensively on this channel. Will global payment solutions via blockchain XRP increase the velocity of money? That answer is yes. Right? And it's a great thread by Molly Elmore right here, who's been putting out some incredible threads here lately. Shout out to you, Molly. Rate that money is spent within an economy. Velocity of money equals GDP divided by money supply. GDP equals value of goods, services exchanged. Money supply equals total amount of money. So now this really gets up against the velocity of money versus thrift, money that's locked up for investing and that kind of thing. But the reality here is money velocity is a controversial topic among economics. The role of velocity and inflation, it causes are subject to debate, and they certainly are. However, what I wanted to focus on is a couple things in this velocity of money, and it was right here. The past few years, there has been a dramatic increase in the supply of money from stimulus and crisis spending. This means a larger amount of money needs to be used by the same amount of people, or the velocity slows down, which it has, right? However, when it comes to the economic health, there's also an economic belief that societies with a high rate of savings indicate health. They are investing in their future. Therefore, velocity and health of economic are debatable. This ties into the paradox of thrift. So in other words, people saving the money versus actually getting it out in the system and using it. I offer the notion that you could see a complement of both things, that when people lock up enough money in investments that are earning returns, you could create some level of scarcity to that money, right? Because it's not in a mattress, it's actually being invested. And then you could still see the velocity of money take place in certain regards. Now, obviously you could stress that in other areas. Regardless, when money is tied up in unproductive places, the rate of spending is slower than it could be. The current system of moving money around the globe, referred to as global payments, includes several unproductive areas. We know that Nostro Vostro accounts have upwards of 5 trillion. I've heard as much as 20 to 25 trillion locked up dormant. Now, there's a place where you're talking about real thrift, wasteful thrift, right? Where money just has to be locked up and it really can't be used. And for the first time in the world, you could unlock that money. And they're starting to do that, I believe, by changing over from the ACH clearinghouse system to a more productive FedNow system, which I believe ultimately, and I'm speculating here beyond her thread, I believe ultimately we'll see the introduction and use of stable coins. And I believe you're going to see more evidence from Jerome Powell and the EU on that measure in just 1 second. So let's talk about that actually right now, because once the blockchain supports payments, it will change to an easy pass scenario where you don't even have to slow down to pass through the toll. And that, I think, is a fantastic analogy by Molly here, because that is really what we're talking about. How fast can I get the same dollar from my hand to your hand to someone else's hand that can continually use that dollar and put it to work for goods, services? So that's really what we're talking about here. And I do believe that, XRP can play a role in that particular situation. Now, let's take a look at this, because the Fed believes it to a great extent too. The emerging crypto asset sector, says the Board of Governors, Federal Reserve, presents potential opportunities to the banking organizations, their customers, and overall financial system. So let's keep that in mind. They understand this. And then let's understand that you can launch stable coins on the XRP ledger at 150% collateral to get 100% off of it. Check it out.
Stablecoin operator has to have an account on the XRP ledger, and they have to decide to operate specific stablecoin systems. So they might say, I'm going to provide a USD stablecoin, and that means that they're going to operate a price feed. There are also some system parameters that they tune to ensure the system stability. The price feed establishes the rate at which the stablecoin is exchanged for XRP, and it's also used to determine whether there's enough collateralization. A system parameter would be the collateralization level, the minimum to issue, which might be, let's say, 150%. And so if you have $150 worth of XRP locked up, you could issue $100 in a stable coin. The price feed also controls when a position can be taken over. We'll talk about that more later. It's part of the incentive system.
All right, now listen to the first 20-some seconds again, please.
The stablecoin operator has to have an account on the XRP ledger, and they have to decide to operate specific stablecoin systems. So
they have to decide to operate one or more stablecoin systems.
Might say, I'm going to provide a USD stablecoin, and that means that they're going to operate a price feed.
And that's interesting because we know that USD coin, for instance, obviously I believe is the official digital retail facing dollar. And they also just recently launched a Euro stable coin as well from Circle. So, what I see taking shape here in my, overview of this, and obviously I'm out on a limb, however thin you want it to be. This is why I say everything runs on the ledger. Because to me, what I see is them putting forth opportunities to really grow and bring the market together on the foundational layer of the XRP ledger. This is why I've always said that everything runs on XRP ledger. It'll run on or across it. I believe they're setting the tone to be adopted as a value protocol that is trusted to move value. I really do believe that. And the native tokens really on the XRP ledger, if you do it right, are everything else, not XRP. It's CBDCs, it's stable coins, and everything else that's on the ledger. XRP just happens to be on the ledger as a bridge to use where needed. And it'll be needed a lot. And I'll tell you how much it needs to be a lot. This is the goal right here. Take a listen here to Miguel Villas, former head of Ripple Global Markets right here. He'll tell you what the goal is, and Chris Larson.
And now, during your time at Ripple, there was a moment there, and I know Chris Larson had even made a reference too. You had talked about speaking about XRP having at some point the same liquidity of a G10 currency. Chris Larson had spoke about the XRP having the same liquidity as like a Swiss franc. Could you speak to that a bit?
That's the goal.
That's the goal.
That's the goal. The goal is to make this a global currency, right? And to make it a substitute settlement asset, so that you want to settle in dollars, great. You want to settle in euro, great. You want to settle in yuan, great. You want to settle in XRP, fantastic. You can do that. So that, in order to make that a reality, and there's a chicken and egg thing here for sure, but whichever one comes first, you're going to need the liquidity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're going to need the liquidity, right? And the liquidity would come from, in my estimation, the reserves that would be put up to back that stable coin at 150 to get 100% off of it, right? Or the CBDCs, right? Or commodities per se. I mean, to me, this is all taking shape here, ladies and gentlemen. And look here, let's not forget about Polysign. Will change the world of finance. Yeah, and I don't even think it's a question mark. I think that answer is a resounding yes. And to move through this very quickly here, think about Polysign and understand its institutional custody provider for digital assets. Understand this too, because I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, and it's an excellent, excellent thread as always from Molly. But I want to say this, they are built and designed, and they used to say it on the website, to scale into the trillions. The reality is we've heard Jack McDonald say many times on Tony's Thinking Crypto that, they're tokenizing the entire capital markets. That's what they're doing, right? And then if you start to factor in, like Molly says here, Cody is smart contract software that runs on decentralized network connected to Ripple and used by Polysign, could be used to support management of contracts where multiple parties are involved, trade finance, ladies and gentlemen, support derivative financial products that require conditional logic and programming to execute. Again, I have said this for a very long time here, that I believe that Polysign and Standard Custody Trust or Standard Trust Custody, the subsidiary thereof, are really like the equivalent of the new version of the Depository Trust Clearing Corporation. Now, she suggests here that, maybe, just maybe, they're doing this and going to custody for the Fed, right? Military level security to ensure digital assets owned by large investors are not subject to hacks. Currently a big problem for crypto industry, which it is, right? So all of this is really, really compelling how it's coming together so very quickly. And don't forget, Polysign Private Equity may be available soon via Link2 for accredited investors. Don't forget that too. It's not now, but it may be soon. So keep your eye out for that as well. Just such a great thread there. And whether or not we're going to see that used in some shape or form in conjunction with the Fed or the Depository Trust Clearing Corporation, which is 1.6 quadrillion in settlement of derivatives every year. And you can't get it settled in the new world of the Internet of Value unless you tokenize everything. And we see that obviously Polysign is set up to do that, knowing that Arthur Brito and David Schwartz are the creators of it. Listen very quickly what Gary Gensler says here about moving money and settling things.
I would also say the blockchain technology, not the cryptocurrencies, the blockchain technology is already being looked at and used on Wall Street to help lower the cost of their back office. They haven't fully adopted, it's not big enterprise solutions yet, but it has a real chance to lower the cost of payments, or if somebody wants to remit something cross-border and not be charged 8 to 10% to send a MoneyGram or Western Union remittance back to.
And it is funny that he brings up MoneyGram before Western Union, knowing that back in the day that Ripple had a deal with MoneyGram. Now Stellar does. But looking beyond that, I shared this as a reminder down here. Don't forget. Remember when the SEC voted in the Sunshine Meeting Act? They voted to unanimously settle with distributed ledger technology. And that's important because that's exactly what we're talking about, moving to same-day settlement using distributed ledger technology. Listen to Caroline Crenshaw from the SEC here.
The ever-increasing pace of advancements in technology, including distributed ledger technology, further shortening the standard settlement cycle in the near future may be both desirable and feasible. Indeed, some such efforts are already underway.
Oh, really? Now, if we get down to here, this is where the vote happens.
Even for same-day settlement, how did commissioners vote on the division's recommendations to amend the Securities Exchange Act on clearing and settling?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes, the recommendation is approved unanimously.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Now, what's interesting is let's look at how the banking system and certainly R3 views XRP. If we take a look at this chart right here, you'll notice in the wholesale circle and fungible circle, we see XRP right here and obviously JPM coin, right? But what's interesting to me is that it really speaks to how the financial system, because that's who R3 is designed to work with, see XRP, certainly as a fungible wholesale token. That's interesting because it started out as retail. So we have to ask ourselves how this all ends up. And interestingly enough, this right here is a clip from Brian Brooks talking about Michael Barr when he was being considered to replace him at the OCC, which did not happen. But now Michael S. Barr, former Ripple advisor, now the vice president of the Board of Governors for the Federal Reserve. But listen to what he says about the Ripple XRP case when asked if it's a security.
The Biden administration who agree with that. You know, if it is true that Michael Barr is my successor at the OCC, I think he's likely to have more of a thesis similar to mine on this. He has a background having spent some time on the Ripple advisory board, for example. And on the other hand, Secretary Yellen has said some relatively skeptical things about the asset class. So I don't think it's a partisan issue. I think it's more about who's a tech adopter and who's an innovator versus who isn't.
Brian, speaking of Ripple, you worked at Coinbase. You worked in the government, albeit for under a year. So tell us, is XRP a security, yes or no?
Well, these are complicated questions and matters of pending litigation, so who can say? But here's what I would tell you, though, which I think is the most important issue about XRP, and that is there is a difference, okay? There's a difference between the way in which an asset is distributed and the nature of the asset at a given moment in time. And I think the issue in Ripple that gets lost in all of the discussion is whatever happened in the original distribution of XRP tokens, 10 years ago, and whether that was or wasn't an unregistered securities offering, that's what the courts will decide. That's a different question from whether XRP today is a security. And the SEC itself has said that assets can change their nature over time as they achieve utility and as they achieve decentralization. So if I had to make a prediction, I'll just make a quick prediction, and that is that there is a settlement to be done here somewhere. And the settlement has to do with the distribution of the tokens so that existing token holders can continue to trade them and find value in them the way that they do.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. And if that doesn't speak to you the way it does me, let me just share my insight on that very quickly. He's talking about the options contracts where XRP was pre-allocated to entities. Line 82 in the SEC case, non-cash agreements were made in order to do this. And we know this because Brad Garlinghouse admitted it to Julia Chatterley on CNN. Begrudgingly. He didn't want to have to talk about it because he knew how the SEC thought of it. And R3 had done option contracts, and Greg Kidd had an option on 1 billion XRP. Now, you would have to believe that only those two entities actually entered option contracts. Then Line 82 was only about R3. It was only about Greg Kidd. No. Not at my house. So you're welcome to think what you want. But the reality here to me is it speaks to what they've done. Listen, something isn't money unless the world agrees that it's money. And the only way for the world to agree that it's money is for you to give them some. But you got to do it in an options contract, because if they don't live up to the deal the way R3 didn't, you can get out of the deal. That's the way I see that today. Is it my speculation? You damn right it is. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. If I'm wrong, I'll make the video. Hit the like and subscribe. Leave a comment below. Know this before we get out of here. We're ranging between 30 and 38 cents, says Dark Defender. This sideways motion may be boring, but watch out, ladies and gentlemen. Monthly indicators are still awaiting the green signal. XRP moves late, but it moves best, he says. Not financial advice from me or him or anyone else. I'll catch all of you on the next one.